Maria by George Petnich. Performed by Tom Zania. Paul and his mother lived in Washington Heights, Manhattan, New York City. His father left home early in his life. His mother suffered from anxiety and depression and was frequently hospitalized. Her family came to grips years ago that Karen wouldn't live a normal life. Paul took care of his mother in between working 2 jobs. He worked as a copywriter full-time and as a New York City yellow cab driver. Balancing his work and taking care of his mother was no easy task. His mother would cry herself and stutter out words while she was trying to get herself to fall asleep, but Paul never figured out what was the root of the problem. She would break down and throw tantrums. Her doctors knew what was going on. But Paul was never let in on the secret of her trauma. Paul was beginning to move up in his company, getting a promotion and assigned assistant copywriting manager. He and his mother lived in a rent-controlled apartment. He could afford to give up his yellow cab driver job. He was taking over in 1 month. His new job pay increase would kick in within 1 month. He drove on Sunday nights, and he was working his shift in Manhattan when he picked up a fare at the Hotel on Rivington on the Lower East Side. The passenger had carried on luggage, so he opened the trunk, and the bellman put it in as the passenger got in. He said, "Where to?" "Penn Station. I'm heading to Boston." Paul said, "First time in New York City?" He said, "No, I don't come here often, but I received a promotion in my company that will have me traveling to New York more. I'm a copywriter in Boston." Paul said, "That's funny, I'm a copywriter too." Paul said, "What's your name?" He said, "Peter." They were stopped at a light when a female with tattoos all over her body was crossing the street. Peter said to Paul, "I find that a sexual turn-off." Paul said, "So do I." He said to Paul, "I was born with a birthmark on my chest that looks like a heart. I've went to numerous doctors to try to get it removed, but they said it's something I just must deal with." Paul said, "I have the same birthmark." They both lifted their shirts and showed it to one another. Peter said, "I'm missing a pinky." Paul said, "It's a small world. I'm missing a pinky too." Peter said to Paul, "Are you a sports fan?" Peter said, "Boston Red Sox." Paul said, "New York Yankees. I love a good rivalry. Do you get to go to a lot of their games?" Paul said, "My mother suffers from depression." Peter said, "My mother's name is Maria Wesley, and she suffers from depression too, and she has anxiety attacks every now and then." "Are you an only child?" Paul said, "Yes." Peter said, "So am I." "Well, this is Penn Station." Paul said, "I feel like I've known you all my life." Peter said, "We bonded." Paul came home and said to his mother, "I picked up a fare tonight, and he was just like me. Same birthmark, no pinky. Only thing different, his mother's name was Maria Wesley, and all our likes and dislikes were identical." Paul told his mother everything in the conversation they had. Karen fell to her knees, grasping for air. She screamed out, "Maria!" Her words were coming out all broken up. Paul had a hard time understanding her. Paul said, "What's wrong?" Karen said, "He's alive. He's alive." Her son died when he was 2 years old. "You don't remember. We kept it from you." Paul said, "Mom, what are you talking about?" Karen said, "Peter is your twin brother." Heartbeat. Increasing heartbeat. by George Petnuch. Performed by Tom Zania. Timmy, 11 years old, and Barry, 8 years old, Shea, lived in the Woodlawn section of the Bronx, New York. After school, their mother would make them do their homework and then let them go and play in the neighborhood. Timmy, who was 3 years older than Barry, was always in charge of social gatherings with the rest of their friends. Barry was treated differently from their father, always getting the extra dollar, getting to sit up front of the car when they would go out, and always getting the bigger hug. Timmy always felt out of place, and sometimes would sit in his room for hours and not come out. But Barry and his mother would always find a way to comfort him. One day, Timmy and Barry and his friends got together and decided to play hide and seek in the Woodlawn Cemetery. Timmy was the leader, and the way they played was if Timmy found someone, they would have to leave the cemetery. Timmy, all anxious, told everyone to hide and stay in place. He said, "Everyone, I'm coming." He went looking. He found Joe hiding behind a tree. Joe went home. It was April, and the sun would go down around 7:30 p.m. He found everyone, and they went home, but Barry was still out there. He was getting close to him when he heard and felt a heartbeat coming from a grave where Barry was hiding behind a headstone. He got closer. He screamed out to Barry, "Let's go!" He said to Barry, "Do you hear a heartbeat and feel the pounding?" Barry said, "No." They both ran home. Timmy said to his mother and father, "Something strange happened tonight. We were playing hide and seek, and when I got close to Barry, he was hiding behind a headstone in a grave. A heartbeat was pounding, and it was getting louder." Barry said, "Mom, Dad, but I didn't feel or hear it." The next day, Timmy went to school, and all he thought about was what happened the night before. Mr. Shea said to Mrs. Shea, "That boy of yours has a wild imagination." Mrs. Shea said, "Give him some time. He'll forget all about it. I know you favor Barry, but Timmy is ours too." When school ended, he met Barry and said, "I got to find out what that was all about last night." Barry said, "Mom and Dad told us not to go to the cemetery anymore, or else we're grounded." It was nighttime, and the sun was going down. Timmy and Barry got close to the grave. Timmy heard the heartbeat again, and it was pounding. "Timmy, do you hear it?" Barry said, "I don't hear it." Timmy said, "My ears are ringing. Barry, what's the name on the headstone?" Barry pointed his flashlight and said, "Timothy Wellman, Sr." Owls started to hoot, and weeds began to fly across the grave from the wind. Barry said, "I'm afraid, Timmy, let's go." They went home, and Timmy ran into his room and locked the door. His mother said, "Timmy, open the door at once." Timmy said, "No, I'm never coming out." His father said, "These supernatural thoughts are going to come to and end right now. Open the door before I take the hinges off." Timmy came out. He said, "I heard and felt the heartbeat again. Mom, his name is Timothy Wellman, Sr." His mother fell to the ground crying. She said, "I can't keep it from you any longer. He was your real father." Timmy, crying, said, "What did he die from?" Mrs. Shea said, "A heart murmur."